You wake before the sun because the ship sounds wrong. Not louder, not chaotic, just wrong in the quiet way a place turns wrong when too many men have gone to sleep with too much gold in their heads. The planks under your boots still groan like they always do. The ropes still pull in the dark. The sea still slaps the hull with that patient rhythm that makes weak men think the world is calm just because the water is. But something has shifted since last night. You can feel it before you hear a single voice. The raid was good. Too good. That is the first truth you learn as a pirate captain. A bad haul makes men angry, but a rich one makes them ambitious. Hunger keeps a crew looking outward. Full pockets make them look inward. At sea, that inward turn is where danger starts. Men who needed you yesterday begin measuring you today. Men who cheered when the last chest came aboard begin wondering how much of the future should still belong to the man in the cabin. You step onto the deck, and the morning gives you all the proof you need. A pair of deckhands stop talking half a second too late. One of the gunners looks away too slowly. A man who should be laughing after a night like that is counting something in his head instead. Nobody is openly disobedient. That would almost be easier. Open defiance can be punished. What you feel now is worse. It is calculation. Quiet, spreading calculation. The kind that moves from hammock to hammock before sunrise and never needs to raise its voice. That is the second truth of command on a pirate ship. A captain is strongest when the crew still believes he is the shortest distance between them and more loot. The moment they start thinking, he is just another mouth standing between them and a larger share. The chair changes shape under him. It stops feeling like power and starts feeling like exposure. From shore, people imagine a pirate captain as the freest man on the water. Fine coat. Better weapons. Private cabin. Final say. But freedom is not what sits in that chair. What sits there is responsibility balanced on appetite, fear balanced on reputation, and one man's authority suspended above a deck full of armed, tired, greedy men. You know this because you did not inherit the chair from a peaceful world. You took it in a world that understood how quickly a captain can become cargo. No title on a pirate ship survives on ceremony alone. A hat does not command a crew. A name does not command a crew. A pistol does not command a crew for very long either. What commands a crew is success repeated often enough that men begin to fear the uncertainty of changing course more than they fear the captain himself. That is why the morning after a great score is never peaceful for you. It is counting, comparing, and waiting. How much was taken? How much was promised? Who bled for it? Who thinks he deserves more? Who thinks another man deserved less? Who got seen during the boarding? Who stayed too far back? On land, gold looks like wealth. On a pirate deck, gold is pressure in physical form. You walk slowly, not because you are calm, but because speed would look like concern. And concern is the one luxury a captain does not get to display for free. The quartermaster is awake. That alone tells you enough. He is checking the men with his eyes, checking the cargo with his silence, checking you without making it obvious. The two of you do not need words yet. On a ship like this, words are expensive when everybody is listening for cracks. Last night, when the chests came aboard, they shouted your name. This morning, they remember their own. You did not become captain because you were the loudest man on the ship. Loud men burn fast. They mistake noise for authority, anger for discipline, and fear for loyalty. A crew may follow that kind of man into one good fight, maybe two, but not through bad weather, thin weeks, broken masts, wounded tempers, and the long, ugly stretches When everybody starts wondering whether the next prize is real or just another promise, you became captain because you understood something more useful. On a pirate ship, command belongs to the man who can keep greed pointed in one direction longer than anybody else. Before the cabin was yours, you watched other captains waste the chair. One drank too much and started believing victory was permanent. Another favored the same inner circle too, openly, and let the rest of the deck do the math. One chased glory when the crew wanted profit. One delayed punishment too long and let disrespect grow teeth. You learned from all of them. A pirate captain does not survive by looking fearless every second. He survives by making the ship itself feel like it still works better under him than it would under the next ambitious fool with a pistol and a speech. You rose because you could read men before they named their intentions. You knew who needed reward, who needed watching, and who needed to think. A decision had been their idea, even when it was already yours. You understood that loot was not just wealth. It was morale, proof, and memory. A successful raid bought authority for another week. A fair division bought silence for another month. A smart route bought confidence. A badly timed risk could cost all three. Even your rise to the chair had less romance in it than outsiders would imagine. There was no clean coronation, no noble challenge under a perfect sunset. It was slower than that, colder than that. A few bad decisions above you. A few good instincts from you. Men starting to ask your opinion before they asked his. Men starting to look at you when the old captain spoke too long. Respect rarely changes hands. In one dramatic moment. Most of the time it leaks. First from one man's judgment, then into another man's posture. By the time the chair finally changed owners, the decision had already been living in the ship for weeks. When you took command, the first thing you learned was how little of it feels like triumph once it becomes real. The cabin is larger than a hammock, but it is also lonelier. The better coat, the better weapons, the better share of the take. All of it comes tied to a new kind of visibility. Every order leaves a mark. Every hesitation travels. Every private doubt becomes dangerous the second it touches your face in public. Men who wanted you on the chair do not love you for sitting in it. They judge whether putting you there was profitable. If it was, they call you strong. If it stops being profitable, they begin searching the deck for another future. That is why a pirate captain cannot think like an ordinary man for very long. Ordinary men get to dislike someone privately, trust someone casually, sleep badly without explanation, or lose their temper and call it a bad day. You cannot. On this ship, your moods affect discipline. Your confidence affects risk. Your fairness affects loyalty. Even the way you walk across the deck after a hard night tells the crew whether the machine is steady or drifting. A pause becomes weakness. A correction becomes insult. A favor becomes evidence. A private conversation becomes rumor before the hatch is fully shut. So you built your command the only way pirate authority ever really lasts. Not through endless cruelty. Cruelty burns through a crew the way fire burns through rope. It solves one problem and creates three more. You built it through measured reward, controlled punishment, and the constant performance of direction. You made sure raids led to real gain. You made sure the men most likely to cause trouble never felt completely ignored. You made sure discipline came fast enough to matter, but not so wildly that the deck began to fear your judgment more than it trusted your usefulness. A captain who is only feared gets watched. The one who lasts is the one who keeps the ship convinced that his command is still the safest road to another payday. A crew does not really ask whether a captain is a good man. Goodness has almost no value on a pirate deck. The real questions are simpler. Can he find prizes? Can he bring the ship home in one piece? Can he divide the take without making too many men feel cheated at once? Can he punish fast enough to stop disorder without poisoning the whole ship with resentment? That is what they want from you. Not virtue, function. The captain is not there to be admired like a king. He is there to keep appetite moving in one direction. Once that line starts bending in too many directions, command stops feeling like leadership and starts feeling like a leak everybody can hear. That is why a pirate ship never obeys from affection alone. Men may cheer your name after a rich haul. They may call you sharp, lucky, born for the sea, whatever words help them enjoy a full pocket. But those words are not loyalty. They are receipts for recent satisfaction. What the crew really offers is conditional obedience. As long as you lead them toward loot, divide it well enough, keep the risks from looking stupid, and stop internal rot before it spreads, they will follow. The moment enough of them begin to think the same gold could be reached with less of you standing in front of it, the chair changes shape. It becomes less a command post than a target. You feel that truth most clearly in the men closest to you. The quartermaster matters because he stands where your authority meets the crew's hunger. He does not need to challenge you openly to become dangerous. He only needs to stop smoothing tension over. He only needs to let complaints stay alive longer than usual. He only needs to start asking fair questions in a colder tone. That is when trouble changes shape, not when knives come out. Earlier than that, when the man who usually helps convert your orders into acceptance begins measuring whether your orders are still worth defending. Then there is the old gunner, the kind of man every long-lived ship seems to grow. He has seen captains rise under cheers and leave under silence. He knows a crew can forgive cruelty if it pays, caution if it pays, even vanity if it pays, but it almost never forgives a captain who starts making men feel trapped in his mistakes. His face is warning enough. It reminds you that command is temporary, even when it looks secure. The younger hands are different. They are strongest after a score, loudest after a drink, and most dangerous when they begin mistaking one successful stretch for permanent entitlement. One of them is always beginning to believe he sees the pattern more clearly than the man in the cabin. One of them is always deciding that if he had your room, your share, your authority, he would be bolder and richer. Youth on a pirate ship is dangerous because it does not understand consequences. It sees your chair and imagines comfort. It does not see the sleepless arithmetic underneath it. That is the hidden contract of command. The crew lets you hold the top position because you keep several ugly things from becoming worse at once. You keep greed from turning the deck into open theft. You keep wounded pride from becoming faction. You keep arguments over shares from becoming a split in authority. You keep raids from turning into suicide dressed as courage. You keep punishment visible enough to matter and limited enough not to poison tomorrow's obedience. If you do all that, men say you have control. What they really mean is that you are still preventing chaos better than the next candidate probably would. And then, the ship begins to shift by inches. That is how you know the contract is weakening. Not through one loud declaration, but through delays that should not exist. A sailor takes an extra moment before moving when you give an order. A laugh dies when you step into earshot, but not fast enough to hide that it had a target. A hand who once came straight to you with a grievance now takes it to the quartermaster first. Two men glance at each other after you speak, as if your words now require private evaluation. Last month, a good raid was your judgment. This week, the same haul becomes something the crew earned despite your caution. You hear discipline described as greed when it touches their share instead of somebody else's. The math is changing in their heads. That is what makes the deck dangerous now. They are not simply angry. Anger burns hot and brief. What you feel around you is colder. It is comparison. Comparison turns men into accountants of grievance. It makes them count who bled, who boarded first, who lost fingers, who stood closest to the guns, and whether the captain's chest got heavier while theirs stayed the same. That is the first real sign they want you dead. Not the knife, not the shout. First, they begin imagining life after you. Then they start rehearsing it in silence. Now the ship becomes a place of management instead of command. Earlier, authority felt like something you held. Now it feels like something you are trying to keep from leaking through 20 small cracks at once. You are no longer asking whether a few men are unhappy. What matters is whether their unhappiness is starting to organize itself. If enough men decide the present arrangement has become less profitable than the next one, the whole structure can change in a night. So you begin doing the work that keeps captains alive. You do not start with rage. Rage is for men trying to prove they still have authority. You start with division, timing, and attention. First, you separate grievance from ambition. Grievance can sometimes be cooled. Ambition is harder. It feeds on delay, uncertainty, and the feeling that power is already moving. Somewhere on your deck is at least one man who no longer wants a better share inside your order. He wants his future to begin where your authority ends. That man is the danger. But he survives only if enough tired, greedy men decide he is less risky than you. That means your first task is not crushing opposition. It is freezing the undecided. On ships like this, the middle decides everything. The loudest complainers are rarely enough. The loyal few are never enough either. What matters is the body of men who would prefer not to choose unless choosing becomes unavoidable. If they stay still, you live. If they begin believing the next captain will come with more gold, more fairness, or less pressure, then your room, your coat, your name, all of it starts turning into temporary furniture. Every move you make is designed to keep uncertainty expensive. The division of the last haul becomes your first battlefield. Gold is never just payment. It is a language the ship understands more clearly than speeches. If the shares feel unfair, every old resentment finds a new spine. If they feel too generous to the wrong men, discipline looks weak. If they feel delayed, imagination takes over, and imagination is poison aboard a crowded deck. So, you move carefully, fast enough that no one can say you are hiding behind delay. Precise enough that the men who took the greatest visible risks cannot claim open insult. Controlled enough that the crew still feels the shape of rank inside the reward. The crew is watching who gets called forward first, whose wounds are acknowledged, and whether the captain still understands the emotional economy of the deck. You speak to the quartermaster before the mood hardens any further. Not in front of everyone. Public conversations create audiences, and audiences turn disagreement into theater. You do not ask him whether men are talking. Of course they are talking. You ask him what they think they are owed. That is the real question. Owed money. Owed respect. Owed explanation. Owed blood. A crew can survive hunger better than it survives the belief that a debt has formed inside it. The quartermaster answers carefully because he is measuring you too. If you sound frightened, he files that away. If you sound deaf, he files that away too. So you give him not softness and not blind force, but a path back to stability in which his own position remains meaningful. Then you turn to the ambitious ones without turning them into martyrs. A dead man can become a story if he dies at the wrong moment. A sidelined man becomes a warning only if everyone sees that his reach failed to grow. You keep him busy. You separate him from the men most likely to mistake his confidence for destiny. You reward somebody near him just enough to introduce doubt into his little orbit. Still, none of this gives you rest. The ship has entered that dangerous phase where every routine carries hidden meaning. A delayed report from the watch becomes a test of whether the chain above him still deserves speed. You feel the deck listening now, not just hearing, listening. Hearing is habit. Listening means men are waiting for proof. Proof that you still know where the ship is going. Proof that your judgment has not gone soft with success. So you give them direction, real direction. You make the next target concrete. Distance, wind, timing, risk, reward. A pirate crew does not unite around abstract authority for long. It unites around movement. Movement gives greed a horizon. It shifts men from counting the last haul to imagining the next one. Idleness is mutiny's friend. Forward motion is yours, if you can make it believable. The plan does not need to feel safe. It needs to feel worthy. It needs to make your continued command look like the shortest road between today's resentment and tomorrow's silver. Even then, you understand what really keeps you alive is not love and not fear alone. It is the balance between them, never tipping fully into contempt. Contempt is what kills captains. A crew can fear a hard man and still follow him. It can resent a greedy man and still follow him. But once enough men begin to look at him and see dead weight dressed as leadership, the rope is already being chosen. Night is the worst time to be a captain, when the ship has started thinking dangerous thoughts. Daylight gives men tasks, noise, movement, and excuses to stay inside their routines. Night takes those things away. It leaves the hull creaking, the lantern light shifting, the sea black and patient beyond the rail, and every man alone with his anger, his greed, and whatever future he thinks he deserves. That is when command becomes most fragile, not because darkness changes loyalty, but because darkness lets men rehearse betrayal without having to see too much of themselves in it. You feel it before anything happens. The watch changes too quietly. A pair of footsteps stop outside your cabin and do not move on quickly enough. Somewhere above you, a murmur cuts off, then resumes in a lower tone. Even the ship sounds divided tonight, as if the timbers themselves are listening. You sit awake long enough to know this is not nerves, it is structure. The same way a captain reads wind in the rigging, you read danger in rhythm. Something has gathered, maybe not enough to explode cleanly, but enough to test the edge of your hold. So you do what men on land never understand about power. You do not wait to be surprised if surprise can still be turned into theater. You step out before the ship comes for you in the dark, barely armed enough to look prepared, not so armed that it looks like panic. The deck gives you the answer at once. Too many men awake, too many faces arranged in that false stillness men wear when they have already decided nothing normal is happening. The quartermaster is there. The old gunner, too. The younger ones are trying to look harder than they feel. Nobody has started anything yet, because mutiny is not courage. Mutiny is arithmetic. Every man here is measuring who else will move first. That is your final advantage. Until the first strike lands, uncertainty still belongs to you. So you speak before anyone else can turn silence into momentum. Not loudly. Loudness would admit fear. You speak like a man naming weather he expected. You ask who believes the next dawn comes easier without you. You ask who thinks a ship full of armed appetite suddenly becomes more fair the moment the captain is gone. Nobody answers at first, because truth is never more dangerous than when it is almost spoken in public. Then one of the younger hands does what ambitious men always do too early. He talks as if grievance alone is a plan. He talks about shares, about risk, about who bled for the last haul, and who slept under a better roof after it. He does not realize that complaint can gather men, but command requires a second thing, a believable morning after. You let him speak just long enough for the weakness in him to become visible. He is angry, hungry, brave enough to hate, but not built to carry the whole deck through what comes next. The men listening hear that too. That is what breaks the charge before it becomes one. Not your pistol, not a threat. A reminder, hanging in the air, that removing the captain is easy compared to surviving what follows. The quartermaster says little, but his silence tells you where the true decision lies. If he had chosen death for you tonight, the ship would already know it. Instead, he watches the men watching each other. He is not saving you out of loyalty. He is choosing order over uncertainty for one more night. That is enough. On a pirate ship, one more night is sometimes the only victory authority gets. By dawn, nobody calls it a mutiny. Men return to rope, sail, and gun, as if routine can bury what almost happened. But the ship is changed in the way all ships are changed once the captain has seen the edge. You still have the cabin. You still have the chair. You still give orders and watch them obeyed. Yet something final has died. Not authority, not yet. Illusion. You know now that the chair was never a destination. It was always a narrow platform built above a pit of need, greed, fatigue, and private calculation. The coat, the larger share, the private room, they were never signs that you had escaped the ship's appetite. They were signs that you had been placed at the point where that appetite focuses hardest. That is the truth of the captain's cabin. It is not luxury. It is isolation with better wood. Men on shore imagine a pirate captain as the freest man on the water because they confuse being above others with being free of them. But every higher position on a pirate ship comes with thinner sleep, colder trust, and fewer places to set your mind down. The crew needs a captain, but it does not love the fact of needing one. It resents the distance, resents the share, resents the authority, and waits for the day all of that can be rearranged without sinking the ship. So you live by staying more useful than replaceable, more feared than despised, more necessary than costly. That is not freedom. That is a sentence with a cabin door on it. And the worst part is this. Tomorrow, if the wind is right and another prize rises on the horizon, they will shout your name again, as if none of this ever happened. That is how the sea keeps its lies alive.